So
Oh.
I'm really super excited to kick off today's panels at the RaaS Infra Gardens with a very cool group of panelists. I'm Paul. I'm one of the co-founders at DIA. DIA is an oracle, and yeah, we're providing oracles on more than 50 different L1s and L2s. One of them, for example, Aleph. And so for us, the RaaS space is really a growth driver, and roll-up as a service, as the name says, it's not something you do alone, but you do it with partners and try to serve then the clients and the end users well together, and bringing new exciting applications next to our price feeds. So today I think we want to start off giving some like the unique perspective from you guys, really like what's your role within the RaaS space, which is very different, and then become a bit broader, like speaking about the different topics which are most prevailing now: centralization, UX, fragmentation, and whatnot. And yeah, so if anyone here in the audience has some questions, just let's have a very interactive, raise a hand. We'll, yeah. So maybe we'll just kick off with a quick intro. Ella, you want to go first?
Yeah. So, yeah, it's working. I'm Ella, head of marketing at Gelato. Maggie unfortunately wasn't able to make it, but I'm stealing her identity for today. Maybe I can have a little talk with the IDOS guys afterwards. So what we do at Gelato, we do roll-up as a service. We help clients bring to life layer 2, layer 3 roll-ups, like Aleph Zero on Orbit. And we actually work with pretty much like everyone here on stage. So we work with the oracles, bringing data on chain, and also with, how do you pronounce Randamu? Drand, for, yeah, like just like verify randomness on chain. So super excited to be here, and off to you.
Anthony, I'm with Aleph Zero, and we're doing privacy in various shapes and forms. You know, you can essentially, our goal is to make this easy to implement, easy to use, easy to work with, and also help with making privacy more understandable to end users.
So I'm Dave Grantham, and I'm here representing Randamu. And I guess probably the best way to put it is we're the source of honesty in these systems. Because when you have verifiable, eventual transparency and provable randomness, it's the way that we can do any kind of attestation where it's like, look, don't trust me. Look, it uses this randomness source that is unpredictable by us. So it's really just a way for all of these systems, like these L2s, these L1s, to bring some level of trust to them. I think that's probably the best way to say it, is like randomness as a service is how you can say, look, you don't need to trust me, right? So it brings a level of honesty to all of these decentralized systems that we're all trying to build. So yeah, happy to answer questions.
Cool, thank you. Maybe Anthony, let's kick it off with you. I guess everyone is familiar with Aleph here. Can you just walk us through your process? Why building a roll-up next to your existing ecosystem? Like, what are the benefits, and how does coexistence look long-term?
Yeah, so we're gonna go on a bit of a time travel journey for a second. And if you go back to 2018, it wasn't as clear. Like, EVM was dominating back then still, but then everyone knew, and I think generally still knows, that WASM as a virtual machine is a better tech, that Rust is more performant. I don't think it's a real world, but people use it, so I'm going to use it as well. And that developers generally prefer Rust to Solidity. You know, Stack Overflow names Rust the leading language for like 7 or 8 years in a row by now. But there is a but, and the but is that it's EVM has become so standardized that it's obviously impossible to kind of not have it unless you are really, 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 really big, and that's one of the challenges. So somewhere along the way, you know, the two things that we wanted to solve, and One of them we are still solving, were performance and privacy, right? So performance we've solved with our consensus protocol. Privacy, we're in the progress of hopefully getting it done. And then we started thinking, what's the best way to introduce EVM compatibility to Aleph Zero as an ecosystem? And you kind of had just like three choices. First one is adding a second VM to the existing chain, which is probably unnecessarily complex. Then you have the, well, essentially like a more of a side chain situation. And then why not just an L2 that uses the L1 as a DA layer, where you have kind of those four stacks that you can choose from. You've got ZK Sync, you've got Arbitrum, you've got Optimism, Polygon CDK. We went with the Arbitrum Orbit stack. It's not a like a vanilla L2 deployment because there is a ZK precompile in it, so it's a customized network and not just like a simple deployment. The goal is to kind of be able to export privacy enhancing features to the broader EVM world, and again, in the end, make them easy to integrate essentially into existing apps.
And what I'm excited about is actually like the data availability, because I think like this is something that's really unique when it comes to Aleph Zero. So maybe you can tell us a little bit more, because I think majority of the new chains are actually settling either to Ethereum or they're settling, like you have data availability with Celestia or EigenLayer, but you actually chose to create your own solution.
I mean, it's fast, it's cheap, it has nice throughput, so why not? That was the mindset. We're not going to be competing on the DA market. This is just for our ecosystem and kind of a way to use the L1 for also the benefit of the L3, and then the shield L2, and then the shielded L3s that we're gonna have on top of all of this.
Ella, what did you guys think with that request back then? I mean, I think this really shows like there are so many different roll-ups, L2s out there. So it's just like trying to summarize a type, but you guys do serve like these bespoke requests, and then there's also plain vanilla product for builders who just want to get going. So maybe you can just like take us first on this journey from like Web3 functions and Gelato to becoming a RaaS provider, and then also how do you serve these different client types, such as an Aleph Zero, which has like a very unique requesting, having their own proprietary DA as part of the stack.
So Gelato started back 5 years ago already as an automation protocol. And we started adding additional products next to it, like gasless transactions, VRF, and so on. And I think it was like actually last spring when we were like, okay, how do we expand? We are already on, like I'd say like 90% of the networks where there's usage. We are, like reaching the limits of where we deploy infrastructure. And then, like those new roll-ups starts to pop up, and we were like, okay, the best way to actually distribute also our middleware services is by creating roll-ups, and with roll-ups we can integrate our services much closer to the sequencer, which means that we can have a much faster service on gasless transactions, on smart contract automation, on VRF as well, just bringing, like faster finality and better times. And when it comes to Aleph Zero, I think like building ecosystem chains is definitely something that's the most complex and hardest thing to do. App chains usually have like potentially 3 or 4 specific infrastructure pieces built into them. For example, like if I look into a trading specific chain, they would come with a block explorer, obviously. They would come with indexer. They would come with oracles and some maybe like, gasless transactions and automation. But when it comes to ecosystem chains, you're really trying to serve all of the different like use cases, maybe gaming, maybe payments, maybe privacy, and there you really require like 20 maybe even more infrastructure integration. So we are really excited to build ecosystem chains. Besides Aleph Zero, we're also building Lisk and Astar, and this is something that, yeah, it's just like great to build.
Cool, thank you. And Dave, maybe Randomoo, can you just, that's I guess a bit beyond the topic of RaaS, but can you just give us some background? We were part of the League of Entropy, DRAN, Protocol Labs. How has this been evolving into Randomoo? And and then maybe a bit more broader, what's your perspective from a randomness truth provider to L2s? Where do you think you can provide value, maybe just on the application stack with the randomness, but also more on the infrastructure side?
Sure. So, so Randomoo is the new entity that is what DRAND has kind of evolved into, right? And I just want to point out that DRAND and the League of Entropy started very, very early in the Protocol Labs history, right? The network's been running for over 4 years. 100% uptime, by the way, for 4 years. Good job on everybody who's worked on this. And it actually pre-existed Filecoin because the idea of a randomness beacon is not new, right? I think everybody kind of knew we needed one. And it was great that Protocol Labs showed the leadership to say, you know, we're going to invest in this. I mean, I think Eric told me earlier that, you know, it all goes back to Rabin, and the idea of a randomness beacon was like in 1983. So, you know, pre-web, pre-everything, basically. So, anyway, fast forward to today. DRAND is moving out as its own. It is its own open source project, and the League of Entropy is standing on its own. And Randomoo is actually providing services that are going to help us provide all of that randomness stuff, the verifiable transparency and the authenticity stuff around L1s, L2s, and all that stuff. So as we elaborate this market, and we're striving for, you know, all the niches that we're going after, ecosystem chains, app chains, all that kind of stuff, they all need this randomness, right? They all do. Everything rests on this. So the main goal with Randomoo is just to make it as easy to use, regardless of whether you're an L1, L2, app chain, you know, ecosystem chain, that kind of stuff. And, you know, the sky's the limit. We're moving into things like threshold signing groups and activating those and that kind of stuff. Like, threshold networks are fundamentally different from blockchains, and they are useful in basically everything we do these days. Everything that's powered by cryptography. I don't know. We're just hoping to be the one that everybody trusts, you know, like, and actually you don't need to trust us because of the way it's designed. So anyway, that's what we're working on.
We still do trust you guys, so yeah, it has been a pleasure working with you so far. Moving maybe a bit like on a higher level now, I guess a challenge everybody is kind of facing in the space. Interoperability seems to become now, with the emergence of so many ecosystems, even more of an issue. Maybe we can like start this first. In your particular use case, interoperability for like an Aleph user, how do you try to bring interoperability and UX together? And maybe some like Ella, Dave, maybe you want to take over and like share a perspective on the broader ecosystem. Where do you see this going?
Right. So, I mean, interoperability and the broader, maybe let's just call it compatibility, really, with the broader space was one of the main reasons we wanted to introduce EVM and into the eco. So this L2 is going to be powered by the same token. We're not issuing any new tokens, or like EVM dedicated tokens is the same thing. And then, you know, I on the high level, I definitely think we are not there yet. We all talk about like L2s being able to tap into the liquidity of Ethereum, but we don't really say what it means. So, you know, it's something that sounds great, but it's still, for the most part and most users, in the near future, so to speak. Then you have different bridging standards, so you end up with different like stables that are wrapped from every bridge, and it's like UX wise, it's absolutely horrible. So
Absolutely
is,
horrible.
Like,
It is.
if you're a normal everyday user and you want to use DeFi, you don't know which bridge you should use. You don't know how to even approach this. So I think we're doing an amazing work in getting there, but it's still all gonna take some time. That's kind of where I'm standing.
So what's a realistic solution to have in due time? Is it a UX thing, or is it on the infrastructure trying to really
Both, like you to I think to achieve the UX that we're all after, which is sort of a mirage thing where you have this one app, you click to go private, you click to bridge to somewhere. All this has to be completely abstracted away from end users. Yesterday with IDOS team and a few partners, we've introduced this Open Five movement where you kind of have a lot of different projects working together to push exactly that, which is your normal everyday users just want an app that is kind of like an open source fintech alternative, and but runs on non-custodial protocols. And to do that, you have to have the infra working well together and kind of agreeing on some standards, and then the front-end UX allowing people to use it without giving it too much thought. I would say that's where we're at least.
I think from interoperability perspective, today what you can do best is leverage the existing technology that's already out there. So for example, like you guys are working with Socket. I think this connects you to 19 plus blockchains. I think also potentially being connected to Ethereum on a native bridge, I think somehow it's overrated. Our chains currently in production, the liquidity is not coming from Ethereum, is coming from other L2s. So I think what's for me much more exciting is, for example, solutions like Espresso with shared sequencing that are coming on mainnet, I think in a month from now, and how those will connect all of those chains together. And hopefully there's going to be some whitelisting. So, I mean, there's not going to be whitelisting because I also already heard things that, like maybe on some of the like clusters or super chains, you're going to need to whitelisting participants to be as part of your, network. So we definitely would want to see where all of the chains are connected, where all of the liquidity is connected, because I think this is at the end of the day what benefits users, and whitelisting benefits certain players to keep liquidity in the space. So I'm very excited to see how this turns out. But I do hope that we're going to see a lot of L-frees on Aleph 0 also very soon, that are going to be all interconnected with some shared sequencing in place. And yeah, borrowing liquidity from the L2.
Yeah, that's the plan. Also, can I do an advert?
you must.
It's been a pleasure to work with Gelato ever since it's been a huge support with this expansion to the EVM world, and this is like honest opinion that we all share in the team. And also thank you, Paul, for supporting us right off the gate. We have to talk probably.
Well, I was going to jump in and say that I'm of a certain age to have remembered when enterprise computing was a thing, when it was the hot thing everybody was trying to figure out. And what I realized is that we're not reinventing the wheel, but we are going through the same growing pains as previous generations. And so what I remember back then, where the money to be made was, and the real improvements in user experiences and the real surges in growth, they came from when we realized that there were certain things that had to happen across the entire ecosystem that could easily be abstracted out. And it's great to see like IDOS. I'm assuming you're an identity solution. I don't know anything about your product, but something like that. Like things around identity, things around like my own personal data, so like provable authenticity and things like that. I don't know if anybody in the room is in the business of like on-chain authenticity, but you're doing it wrong. You're actually doing it wrong, because the idea is that, hey, proving that this is my data needs to be something that's not tied to a chain. Proving that these are my keys is something that shouldn't be tied to a chain, because it has to happen everywhere. And if you're tied to a chain, then it's like, yeah, now we have to have all of these like translators and whitelist, bridging and all this. No, there's certain things that just need to happen. So like when we decided that back in the enterprise days that we were all going to have this idea of like X509 certificates or whatever, like the things that could be abstracted out of each individual solution, that's when we saw huge surges in growth and huge improvements in the usability, to the point where we were seeing non-traditional users coming in. Like the joke is, can your mom use it, right? If your mom can use it, then it's been properly, the pieces that should be abstracted has been properly abstracted, right? That's how I look at it. And so like randomness, for instance, I know this is a thing that you always never really want to think about, but it's critical to the security of everything. It's a proper abstraction. Like what Randomoo is doing is properly abstracting out the source of randomness. We're not tied to a chain. It's totally different, right? And I think that when we start seeing identity solutions and data layer solutions of like, yes, this is my data, I did create it, or I properly licensed it, so now I can train an AI on it, or all that kind of stuff, that's when we're going to see the huge inrush of non-traditional users. We're all traditional users. We're people who love spending hours reading documentation and playing with things that suck. But like my mom's not going to use it until it's all been properly abstracted. Anyway, that was my thoughts. Just listening to both of you. It was like yes and yes.
Solving it, by the way.
That's awesome. I hope you do. I hope you do. He said you're solving it. I don't know what you're solving, but hopefully you're solving it.
We're solving everything.
Amazing.
That's great. That's great. Anyway, that was my 2 cents on that.
I think this connects nicely to productization versus modularity, and I guess something, again, coming back to this idea, okay, I want to use my own DA layer, or I want something which actually works and I can have up and running in the next 96 hours. Ella, like, walk us a bit through like these different customer types. I mean, one is sitting here next to you, but what's like the inflow in interested parties deploying rollups now?
I think what's interesting is that we've seen many more, I'd say like, beginning of the year, there was a lot of requests for ecosystem chains. And now we're seeing that trend changing, and we see much more app chains coming to us, talking about that we want to build our own rollup, we want to have a dedicated block space, we want to actually create, like kind of like a product that is fully fitted to us. We also see that in numbers. So if you look at the number of rollups deployed this year, so far we have, I think, like 89 L2s, and we have 38 L3s. And L3s are where app chains are going to really thrive. And that's because currently when you're building an L2, you're still onboarding your users from Ethereum, and that's still super expensive. But when you're building an L3, you're onboarding users from the L2, which decreases the cost significantly. It's also when you're an L3, you have like everything, all of the transaction fees and everything goes down. So that's what we see, like app chains, L3s is something that's definitely been dominating the conversations the past months.
And maybe follow up here, what's the most relevant characteristics for these app chains? Is it cost, like also on the L3? Is it?
So why people are choosing to build app chains, or
yeah, what's
what
most critical to this client type? Is it like ease of use of the product, or is it the cost?
Definitely cost.
They
are looking
of the transaction or the infrastructure.
Infrastructure altogether.
Okay.
I think like there's something that we still need to solve. About 30% of the rollup cost is like actual infra, like DA, roll-up, execution layers, everything, and then 70% of cost is like infrastructure. So if you want to have, like, I don't know, like, I'm not going to say that, like oracles deployed, or, like block explorers or things like that, you need to pay for all of those integrations. And it's crazy because, like everyone is advertising roll-ups for $3,000 per month, but the reality is if you want to have like a fully interoperable roll-up with all of the infrastructure, you're going to end up with a much higher bill at the end of the day, because also, you know, like Layer 0 or IDOS or DIA oracles, they need to live from something. And this is, I think, the next big challenge that we are facing is how do we bring those costs down? Because when you're I don't know, like just think about it, when you're building a website in Web 2, you're not going to pay 100K just for the infrastructure, right? You're going to pay, I don't know, like $50 max if you have like a really fancy website, right? And I think that's where we need to go with Web3 as well.
Okay,
more abstraction, right? So if L3s are app chains, then L4 is no chain, right? You're getting all the things that cost money that out of your cost of goods sold, right? Like the things that are currently really expensive because they're tied even to an L3 or an L2. You pull that stuff out, right? Then that's the only way you're going to eliminate the cost, is to eliminate the need to do that. I'm not saying what you're doing is wrong or anything like that, but like, I guess maybe focus to the things that are absolutely necessary at each piece.
But I think it's fair to say that's currently what I guess clients are looking at, right? Exactly what you said. Okay, you need a block explorer, you need some RPCs, you need an oracle. I mean, big bias here, but there's some like core elements you need.
You need a randomness beacon for sure.
Probably you also need randomness, but I think if you strip this all off, you're left with nothing, like a database without any information for the end user, or you need to go off chain then, I guess, to not need a block explorer. But then you're also sacrificing actually all the benefits while you're doing this in the first place, or am I missing something?
A lot of things don't need consensus. Like identity transactions don't need consensus because they're either first or third party. So it's like I can make a self-attestation and you can choose to trust it. But more likely what I'm going to do is make an attestation and say, don't trust me, talk to them. That's a third-party transaction or a three-party transaction. And as we know, we only need distributed consensus when you have a two-party, because the consensus network is the oracle, or is the third party, right? Okay. And so
yeah, but to make a transaction, right, you need some kind of wallet interface. You probably want to make it gasless. You want to have like
I get
a
it.
user
that's what
experience.
I'm saying. No, that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying I know everything, but narrowing things down to just the bare minimum of what you need to like execute a transaction, and then everything else, like the identity stuff, can all be outside and off chain, right? Because that's common to all of these solutions.
So maybe we do achieve. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Question for Gelato. Sorry, what was your name again? Anna. Yeah. So I've noticed within the RaaS space, there's some apprehension from apps that are looking to launch their chain towards centralized RaaS providers, especially following the outages on Proof of Play and DGen. And so I wanted to hear how Gelato is addressing the centralization risks, both on a key level and a chain level, as a centralized RaaS provider.
I'm going to be transparent. I'm on the marketing side, so it's going to be a high ball, but to really go down into tech. But what I can tell you is that our customers don't care that much about like total decentralization. What they care about is to make their systems, work. And I think, if you look currently at the Ethereum space, a lot of, when you are deploying additional infrastructure onto it, like the distribution of the decentralization is on a spectrum, I'd say. And, also within the rollups, you can decide how secure you want them to be. Like maybe you want to be, a normal rollup, but then you need to pay the rent to Ethereum to be a normal rollup. But you can also be, I'd say like a Validium or Optimium, and then you are using, alternative data availability to post data to, and then you're not as decentralized anymore, so there's definitely a security risk. Back to your question, I think like majority of the projects that we build for, they prioritize user experience over decentralization. I think like there is not many use cases currently that value like a really high degree of decentralizations. And those that do, they build on Ethereum.
Just to respond to that, yeah, I agree with you that most people don't care about decentralization until they do. And you know, I think with the degen chain outage, I mean, there were a lot of people who lost money there because it was, you know, one company running running the sequencer, and when they didn't notice it went down, I mean, it was a configuration change that took down multiple chains, right? A proof of play as well. And you know, that type of an outage really hurts the users. And now it's like, okay, well, maybe decentralization from the RaaS provider makes more sense.
So I don't know much about this incident. What I know is that it happened on a fork of Orbit, which means that technically it was not signed off by Orbit stack, you know, like as a, you know, like fully compliant Orbit chain. So obviously, you know, like when you do this degree of the customization, things like this can happen. But I think like that's why it's also important to stick with standardization and the code base, because there's people who can take responsibility for that.
I guess it's fair to say that's probably also a journey, and that's a good transition to, okay, that's the current state with possibly a higher degree of centralization, especially when it comes to sequencing. But I mean, this is not where we're probably going to be looking at in 12 months' time. And that's maybe a good transition to I mean, we talked about productization with the benefit of possibly driving down prices and making this more accessible, even possibly more centralized with the current stack to serve like a dApp chain. Then you need some very modular solutions for your use cases where you want to introduce different parts of the stack. I'm curious, and this is like open question, anybody who wants to take it, what's like the next really interesting innovation in the RaaS space? Is it something like shared sequencing, like catering to the level of decentralization? Is it something UX based, maybe something very specific also to your use case or some clients here you're facing, also in the randomness context? Just curious, like what's the next interesting thing? You mentioned espresso, for example, maybe, yeah.
Yes. I mean, random is going to be everywhere, so I don't really care what.
I kind of figured you would say this.
I mean, to be honest, like, that's the benefit of being a commodity that everybody needs. Is like, yeah, sure. That's like saying, what's next in the world where we produce wood? It's like, yeah, we make the wood. Everything builds with wood.
Like, just to follow up on this, what do you think is most relevant for someone who wants randomness? Price, speed, or true, like the integrity of the random value, and like put it like rank it?
That is a really good question. Obviously, the transparency and the proof of randomness is somewhat application dependent, and I think that there are some applications out there where they think, oh yeah, we don't need that piece, we just need good random numbers. But I think in the world that we're already in now, I was going to say fast approaching, but the world where we have AI just faking literally everything, I think we're all going to quickly depend on proof of what is and isn't true. And that, I mean, the verifiability of randomness is going to be a part of that, right? I think what we're seeing right now is a transition in security models and authentication models, actually. I don't know if anybody's ever seen this, and if anybody, like, nod if you agree with me. But I think what we're doing is we're moving from a world where we're retroactively trying to prevent things to proactively proving, like, this is my data, therefore I can do this. I mean, being blockchain people and Web3 people, we kind of take this for granted because it's like, you know, the age-old adage, right? Not your keys, not your token, you know, not your coins or whatever, right? But, and so we've always been operating on this idea that, like, no, I can prove it, right? But I think we need to remember that we are such a tiny part of our internet, our civilization, right? We're taking this for granted. And I think the rest of the world is figuring out what we've known for years, right? You have to be able to prove something up front before anything gets done. And so, I don't know, to answer your question more directly, I think price and speed are probably second to proof of randomness, to be honest. Because like everything, it's going to be, proof that I own this, proof that you don't need to trust who I am, but I can give you proof from 6 other vendors, KYC vendors, government institutions that all agree that I am what I say I am, right? So, yeah, I think being able to prove anything is going to be like the thing we're all doing in a year from now. Like literally every product and everything we're doing is going to realign around providing proof of identity, proof of randomness, proof of execution, I think that's going to be the thing. I really do. Because if you're not doing that up front, then AI is so good you won't even be able to detect the bad data and remove it. So we have to change, right? Like Facebook is going to have to change.
Yeah.
Just wanted to say that we're doing the zero knowledge proofs for all of that. So very happy that you said that. Everything needs to be provable. Then how cool would it be if somebody was working on like a universal ZK privacy layer that you can plug into everything? That would be like really fun.
Yeah, that'd be really interesting. Are you building that? That's awesome.
Yes.
Yes, you are. I know you are. That's really interesting.
I'm going to have a boring take. At Gelato, we think that standardization is something that's super important. And it needs to start across like lower level infrastructure as well. If you think about it, like today, if I want to deploy, I don't know, like an indexer or oracles or Gelato automation, I need to go and talk to all of those providers potentially and, make maybe even a custom deal if your RaaS provider doesn't have one. And then, the devs need to work on dedicated integrations. I think how it should be solved is like APIs so that you can just plug it in. Everything could be automated. So this is, for me, number one, standardization of the middleware infrastructure, and then also standardization of the execution frameworks. Because this is, I think, we still have too many forks. I think we still are, all of us, working too much on infrastructure, and we should really work, instead of working on infrastructure, working on applications. And I think that standardization is going to allow application builders to really focus on user experience rather than thinking about okay, how does my stack work?
I was going to say, I want to add on to this. What if we standardize the messages and not the APIs? Because therefore, if you had standard messages, then the way you communicate doesn't have to be through an API, right? I know it's difficult to make money in an age where you're not a gatekeeper, you're not the API provider. But, for the comment earlier about we need to push on decentralization more, like the most decentralized thing on the internet today is still email, believe it or not. It's still email. Like I can use open tools, open protocols, open cryptography. I can download all my emails off of Gmail, upload them to Fastmail without a loss in service. I can replace Google. I literally can replace Google with any other email provider, and I don't lose service. And the only reason I can is because the message formats are standard, and the protocols are standard.
But I think maybe it's fair to say, and this is what you said before, right? An ecosystem building in solidity, like being the standard go-to, is kind of like, it becomes a standard, no matter if the messaging format is the best perfect way. But I think we don't have an institution just to decide this. I don't know who decided on the email protocol standard, some university group possibly. I think here it's just market adoption.
It was actually the University of Washington.
Driving the standards we all want to use. And I think this was actually quite a nice closing, because I just got a signal to finish this off here. It's Infra Garden days, but I think we're all very excited to see more applications being built on all the infrastructure we're providing, being randomness, block space, and privacy, and lots of components to enable those. But so thanks again here for your question. I want to open this up for maybe one or two last questions, not to overrun. Otherwise, if there are any, just going to finish off with one last ask for here my panelists. We did ask this in Denver, I think, coming back to the RaaS ecosystem development. Just expectations, how many chains will we see year's end? And I'm going to tell you if this is more or less than the people said in Denver. State of the market.
In H1, we've seen, I think, 120. So I'm looking for at least probably 120 to 130% more. So probably 250 chains, I would say, by the end of the year.
I don't know how many.
On Aleph Zero, right?
All of them.
How many?
Just one.
And
Just
more.
one.
But I don't know how many, but more. Definitely more.
I don't know that I have a good answer to this. And it's more of a confidence in, are we growing or contracting? I'm going to be the contrarian here and say that I think we're going to struggle to see more. I know that everybody's super excited about it, but in normal business cycles, everybody gets really excited and then they realize there's only 4 customers and they were all locked up by one vendor, right?
I'm actually not that much excited about it. I just think there's going to be more.
Yeah, let's hope there's more, because that means there's more for all of us. There's room for all of us, right? To be honest, yeah.
I think
I don't know. I'm not as excited, with the idea that there's just going to be a ton more. I think we might be reaching saturation in some areas, in some sections. I know that's very vague, and I'm not going to get any more specific.
It's specific enough. I think we were 1,000 at the end of the year was the highest.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
Still some time. Let's make some space here and for the next panel. And thank you so much for joining me here. It was a true pleasure and also fun to work with you, obviously on a day-to-day basis, and having you here with the audience. So thanks so much, everyone, for joining in and spending some time here.